Okay, so good afternoon, everybody. I think it's afternoon for most people. Perhaps there are some from Europe to whom I would say good evening, and maybe some from Asia to whom who are joining from Asia to whom I would say good night, and maybe anybody from Hawaii, so I would say good morning. Okay, so we're going to begin our afternoon, our program in my time afternoon. We'll begin with a period of meditation. And last evening, Aya Dhammadippa gave instructions in metta, loving kindness, and I'll also be leading a meditation on metta or loving kindness. I'll do it in the way that I usually do on Wednesday evening. So probably there are people on this program, on this retreat, who also join my Wednesday evening program. And so don't be disappointed if the method of practice is exactly the same, since the key to successful practice is not always to be varying the method, but to apply the method consistently, repeatedly, and consistently. Okay, so the way I explained the practice of loving kindness, we start to move from smaller, more familiar groups outward until we universalize the loving kindness. So let us begin first by taking a firm but comfortable sitting position. You could be sitting cross-legged on a mat or on a meditation bench if that's what you prefer, or you could be sitting on a chair but not relaxing too much onto the back of the chair. If for some reason you find even that difficult, you can be lying down, but trying to keep alert. Okay, but in the sitting position, the key at the outset is to keep the upper part of the body, the torso, straight and upright, but not stiff or rigid. Let the body relax. And you could put the hands on the lap, one hand over the other, with the thumbs lightly touching. Or if you prefer, you could also have the hands on the knees or on the thighs. And you hold the head with the nose perpendicular to the navel. The mouth closed, eyes lightly closed, and the chin pulled in just a very slight angle. And then once you establish the correct posture, then you let the mind settle into the body. Just feel the body in the present moment in the sitting position. Relaxing any tensions in the body. And then you let your mind or your awareness move to the region around the heart. You're not trying to feel the physical heart, but just let the mindfulness settle in that region around the heart. And if you attend closely to that region, you should be able to pick up a kind of soft and gentle feeling. Soft, warm, and gentle feeling. And it's from that base that we'll be developing the loving kindness, and we'll be moving into expanding circles of people using the simple four-phrase formula. And I'll recite for each person or group the four phrases. And then you use those phrases, and I'll pause for a couple of minutes. And in that pause, you use the phrases to try to generate the feeling expressed by those words, by the phrases. And you could use the phrases in any way that you prefer, all four of them. Or if you prefer one, two, or three, you could use it that way, whatever works. Okay, so we each start with ourself. And first you generate the loving kindness toward yourself. If you have a visual mind, you can see an image of yourself in your mind's eye. If not, don't worry about it. But you generate the wish, may I be well, which means in effect to be healthy. May I be happy. May I be safe from all harm. And may all my good aims be fulfilled. Again, you want yourself to be well, to be happy, to be safe, and for all of your good aims to be fulfilled. Yeah, usually you have to keep on repeating the phrases, but don't just do it mechanically, but go for the meaning, and based on the meaning, generate the wish expressed by the words. Okay, now you take a few people who are very close to you. This could be your immediate family members, or very close friends, and you just take about most four such people, three or four, and you bring them into your mind, and from the heart you generate the wish, may my may my dear ones be well, may they be truly happy, may they be safe from all harm, and may all of their good aims be fulfilled. Okay, now at the next level, you take a few people that you would consider to be acquaintances. These can be some neighbors, people living on your street or your building that you occasionally just have a little chat with, or it could be colleagues at work, or it could be more distant relatives. Again, you just take maybe four such people, three or four, bring them into the mind, and again from the heart you generate the wish. May these good people be well. May they be truly happy. May they be safe from all harm. And may all their good aims be fulfilled. Okay, now we're going to start spreading the loving kindness geographically. And so you can start with the city or town in which you're living. And now you want to extend the loving kindness to the entire population. So you have to imaginatively bring that whole population into the range of your mind, realizing that that population is made up of many, many individual people who are just like yourself, wanting to be well, happy, and safe, to realize their aims in life. And so you send those good wishes to the whole population of the town, city, or the nearest town or city if you're in the countryside. And again, from the heart, you sort of turn the phrases over in the heart, not just mechanically repeating them, but trying to generate the feeling of wishing the people to be well, happy, safe, and for all their good aims to be fulfilled. Okay, now at the next level, you spread the loving kindness to the entire population of the country in which you're living. You can see all of those people as being, even though they're all, all strangers to you, but you can see them as being your own, the elders as being your own mother and father, the younger ones as being your own sons and daughters, others in your own age group, your brothers and sisters. And then on that basis, you generate the wish for them to be well, happy, safe from all harm, and for their good aims to be fulfilled. realize that they're not just numbers, even here, US, 350 million people, but each one is not just a number, but a person, a human being. And on that basis, you can generate the loving kindness. Okay, now next, we spread the loving kindness to the entire human population of this world, taking people in every country, every continent, every race, religion, nationality, generating the wish for all people to be well, happy, and safe, and for them all to fulfill their good wishes. And when doing this, I often find it's most effective for me to focus on the children in the world, generating the wish for all of the children to be well, happy, and safe. Okay, and then finally, one extends or expands the loving kindness without any differentiations, just extending the loving kindness to all sentient beings without distinction, wishing all beings to be well, happy, and safe. Okay, now you let go of all mental formulations and you bring your mindfulness back to the body in the sitting position. Simply being mindful of sitting, and you could let the energy of the loving kindness spread through the body. And then you can take a couple of mindful breaths in and out, in and out. And then you can mindfully open your eyes. And it's helpful when ending the session, the way I do it, is to rub the palms together to create some warmth. And then to rub the palms over the face. And then you could rub the back of the neck, the shoulders, shoulder blades, and then come down the lower back to the buttocks, and then down to the knees, and massage that area. And then if you've been sitting cross-legged, then you can come down to the feet and the toes and massage them. Okay, so that concludes our meditation of loving kindness. And now one of our board members, David Broughton, is going to be giving us a little just overview of, because this is what we call the word from our sponsor. Yeah, David Broughton is the vice chair of Buddhist Global Relief and one of actually the founding members. And so he'll give us a little overview of the kind of work that Buddhist Global Relief does.
Thank you, Bhante. Namo Buddhaya. So I would like to talk a little bit about Buddhist Global Relief, beginning with our primary focus, which is hunger. You know, the Buddha recognized that hunger is the worst illness. And as I was putting this together, I was reflecting that the Buddha experienced hunger himself very personally, in part through his ascetic practices, but I'm sure there were times when he was wandering as an ascetic, even after he became the Buddha, when food was not abundant and he experienced hunger. So he understood how hunger can affect us, how it can affect not only our body, but our mind, our relationships, how it can become so debilitating. And when we look at the state of the world today, at the immensity of the hunger issue or the hunger problem, it's easy to get overwhelmed. I mean, 2.3 billion people are food insecure. 333 million of them suffer from acute hunger. Hunger and malnutrition accounts for 50% of all the deaths of children under 5. That's just an enormous number. And if you've traveled to countries such as Haiti or Mexico or India, where you see firsthand the children who are suffering, you begin to realize the enormity and the immensity of the problem. Since 2015, little progress has been made on a global scale. in terms of solving hunger. Up to that point, we had done some, we had seen some significant movement. Today, hunger remains a serious or alarming issue in 43 countries, particularly concentrated in Africa and Southeast Asia. So I don't know about you, but when I look at how far it is we have to go and I become discouraged, it's important for me to also look back and see how far we've come. So I'd like to do that with you briefly. So Buddhist Global Relief got its start in 2007, actually, when Bhikkhu Bodhi wrote the essay, A Challenge to Buddhist. In that essay, he talked about the specific challenge facing Buddhism in our age is to stand up as an advocate for justice in the world, a voice of conscience for those victims of social, economic, and political injustice who cannot stand up and speak for themselves. It was after reading this particular essay that I happened to be in New York and asked if I could meet Bhikkhu Bodhi. I'd read many of his translations, and I was rather surprised that he had agreed to meet me. And I remember sitting outside at Changyang Monastery visiting, and we talked about his essay and about what we could do in response, and and why it was important that maybe we start an organization. We were joined by a number of other students, and after a few rounds of discussion, we resolved to form a Buddhist relief organization. In June of 2008, we held our first organizational meeting where we agreed to focus on world hunger. By August of 2008, we had incorporated, we had obtained our 501c3 status, and we had a board of directors. By December of 2008, we had raised a whopping $30,000. And by December of 2008, we funded 4 projects, one of which I remember was a feeding program in a hospital in Vietnam where people would sleep in these seemed like quickly made huts while they were receiving medical care, but there was no food served. And if they ate, it was because their family or somebody fed them. And so we were able to join the Vietnamese Red Cross in making that possible. Our mission since those early days has expanded somewhat because we've seen hunger in all of its dimensions. We still are about the work of providing food assistance wherever we can. But we also see that the education of children, particularly girls, and in helping women to start right livelihood projects are also essential in addressing the root causes of hunger. In addition, training small-scale farmers, which constitute 80% of all farming in the world, in sustainable farming and food production is another focus that we've developed. We've been guided in this by the Dharma and, of course, the core values that come from the Dharma: compassion, service, faith, collaboration, integrity, respect, global awareness. We agreed early on that we were not going to be about the business of developing our own programs and projects and inserting them in countries, but rather working with indigenous groups wherever possible, with existing relief organizations who already had boots on the ground, who were already doing good work there that we could then support in partnership. Today, we have something like 60 projects around the world. And as you'll see later on, these projects are strategically located in areas of greatest need. Here are some examples of the partners that we have formed along the way. The Bodhicitta Foundation in India, we've been working with them since 2015. And this program takes young women who are impoverished and helps to provide them an education. It gives them job skills. In many instances, it shelters them as well. These are young women who otherwise would be forced to marry and whose entire life then would be impoverished and consumed by their family. And once they got old enough, or if their husband were to die, then they would be put out. And so giving them another road to develop is so important. The Shraddha Charity Organization in Sri Lanka, which provides pure water through deep wells throughout the countryside, but also food scholarship for these young people who, again, are impoverished and who can, A, not afford to go to school, and B, if they go to school, can't afford to eat because their families don't have the wherewithal. And so to be able to provide them with a nutritious meal during the day is absolutely vital. Action Against Hunger in Tanzania, a large organization that we've worked with since 2020. Here, we particularly respond to the food and nutritional needs of children, and have supported some emergency responses as well. But as you can see, one of the programs of Action Against Hunger is helping these small farmers to do better by way of crop gardening and developing food alternatives for themselves, and hopefully producing enough food that they can sell a little bit and then bring additional income into their households. The Jamajarini Wittana School in Thailand serves primarily orphans and young women who may come from single parent families, again, impoverished families. And we again provide the meals during their stay there. Many of these young women live in fact at the school, and the school has received numerous awards for the quality of its education and for the opportunities that it provides to these young people. As a Buddhist organization, we are particularly sensitive to the needs of the monastic community. And we know that given the current coup in Myanmar and the terrible devastation that's wreaked upon the country, many of the monastics are no longer able to be supported by their local community and going on alms rounds, and therefore need supplemental assistance, which is something that we do. This past year, we provided direct assistance to over 129,000 individuals, and indirect assistance, that's their family members or their villages or communities, to another 301,000 individuals, almost 302,000. As you can see, a large portion of the people that we serve are young women or women between 19 and 18, and then and infants. We have been richly blessed, as you'll see in a moment, by the support of people like yourselves. And because of that, we've also been able to provide emergency relief funding. The emergencies in this world seem to be growing exponentially, but they continue to be focused on a few areas of the world. This past year, we provided $841,000 in emergency funding, and we just recently provided another $300,000, again in the areas of greatest need. Our annual support has gone from $30,000, like I said, in 2008, to currently over $3 million, almost $4 million. The programs that we have supported, 4 in 2008, now to over 60. But we are always conscious that we are stewards of the resources given us. These are a sacred trust. And so we watch every penny. And as you can see by this graph, only about 3% of all of the money that we raise goes for administrative cost. Fundraising costs for another 113,000 or 5%, but 92 cents out of every dollar goes to direct program and emergency relief. And being myself, having worked in the not-for-profit sector, I find these numbers to be absolutely astonishing. Most organizations, it's 15, 20, 25%. As I say all of this, though, I am reminded that there is still so much more to be done. We cannot just look back or see how far we've come. We also have to look ahead and see what still needs to be done. The areas of greatest need, as I mentioned earlier, exist in East Africa, South Africa, West Africa, Latin America, and the Caribbean, the Middle East, Asia. And of course, all of this has been exacerbated by the war in Ukraine and the terrible impact that has had upon grain production and the shipping of grain, both from Ukraine as well as from Russia. And now the war in Gaza, which, according to recent reports, 95% of the Palestinians living on the Gaza Strip, often go a day without having eaten, and it may be days on time. Fully 50% of the children there are at risk of starvation. So I would leave you with this thought. The Buddha said, one should train in deeds of merit that yield long-lasting happiness. And what are those? Generosity, a balanced life, a life of peace, developing a loving mind. And by cultivating these three things, deeds yield happiness, the wise person is reborn in bliss in a non-troubled, happy world. But how do we go about training ourselves in deeds of merit that yield long-lasting happiness? We engage with the world. We practice the Dharma each and every day. We show our generosity by joining organizations like Buddhist Global Relief. And it doesn't matter what it is you bring, whether it's your time, your talent, or your treasure, all can make a difference. We have needs for volunteers. We have needs for support. The vast majority of our support comes from the people like those who are in attendance today. And if you do that, not only does the Dhamma tell us that we will be born in bliss in a non-troubled, happy world, but we also will make this world a little bit better place than we found it. On behalf of Buddhist Global Relief, on behalf of all the people who have benefited because of your support, I want to thank you. Namo Buddhaya.
Yeah, thank you, David. That was a very beautiful overview of the work of Buddhist Global Relief. And one thing I should also mention that the success and the development of BGR has been due largely to the very dedicated, selfless work of our staff, who put in a great deal of work for salaries that are probably minimal on today's standards, but they do this as not for the sake of earning money, but as an expression of compassion and action. Yeah, what I think we'll do now, before I will be giving a Dharma talk, but since we've been sitting for the last now almost 50 minutes, we could take a couple of minutes just sort of to get up, stretch around. If you want to take a cup of tea or something, you can do that. And so my clock says 2:50. So let's come back at 2:55 after 5 minutes, and then I'll give the talk. We'll start the talk then. Okay, I think we can start now. Okay, so again, welcome everybody to this afternoon session of the BGR retreat on the topic of sustaining hope in hard times. So that is the title that we gave to this retreat. And so I want to begin by first speaking a little bit about what do we mean by hard times. Because hard times, the way I look at it, it could be, we could see it from two different perspectives, what I call the personal and the communal or collective. So from the personal perspective, hard times would be the challenges that one is facing in one's personal lives, the inward challenges. Perhaps you meet repeated disappointments, that you find your hopes are shattered, things don't measure up to your expectations for yourself or for others. You experience feelings of frustration, inner conflict, which could even lead to a loss of self-confidence. And when you lose your self-confidence, this can bring a kind of negative evaluation of yourself, loss of hope for the future, and then finally you can find yourself slipping into moods of despair. So that is the personal dimension of hard times. And then we have the collective dimension when you sort of look out from your own personal point of view and you look out at the world with great expectations and you find that we're running up against these stubborn, obstinate, formidable social problems, economic problems, political conflicts, disappointments in the political sphere, environmental problems. I sort of grew up in the mid 1960s. I came of age in the mid 1960s when we had things like Bob Dylan's song, The Times They Are a Changing, and we were expecting this is the age of Aquarius, that everything, the civil rights movement, the anti-war movement, and we thought we were coming into a kind of golden age. And yet again, we're running up against the same, almost the same problems, just in different disguises, different forms. We still have economic challenges, great disparities of wealth, inequality, poverty. We have new wars, the war in Ukraine, and now this terrible, terrible assault on the Gaza Strip and in the Palestinian territories. We still have social tensions, racism, homophobia, anti Semitism, anti immigrant sentiment, and then also the despoliation and the destabilization of the natural environment of the climate. And so we face these, major challenges, and if we just sort of let ourselves get overwhelmed by them, then we can lose all hope for the future and plunge into that mood of despair. And so the remedy for this despair, when we run up against these challenges and difficulties that we meet in these hard times, sort of what should sustain us and keep us going is having some hope. But what is this hope? And I did a kind of inquiry from looking at this word hope, this English word hope, from a Buddhist point of view, asking myself, is there any word in the Buddhist texts, in the Pali language, that exactly corresponds to our concept of hope? And I came up blank. There are words that mean desire, often in a negative sense, or wishing, but that wish is seen in the Buddhist text as a expression or manifestation of craving or clinging or futile wishing for things to be better. But those ideas in the Buddhist text don't correspond to the positive valuation that we place on hope, coming out perhaps from the Christian tradition, the three great virtues, what are they? Faith, hope, and charity. And so when I was facing the task of preparing a talk for today's event, I was wondering, how do I approach this from a Buddhist point of view? And I have a friend with whom I study Chinese. We read Chinese texts together almost every week. Her name is Sally King. She's retired professor of Buddhist studies from James Madison University. And I told her my dilemma, and she said, well, I haven't written a paper. She specializes in engaged Buddhism, and she said, I've written a paper on hope and engaged Buddhism. And she sent it to me, and I read it, and I found that she gave a very good treatment to the concept of hope. And she explains hope on the basis she sees hope as emerging from three ideas in Buddhism. The first is acceptance, that we have to recognize things as they really are, and then accept things the way they are, which doesn't mean that we passively resign ourselves to the way things are, but we have to see our current situation, whether personal or collective, and then accept that this is reality. This is our starting point. This is where we're standing now. But then the second element comes in, that the present that we have to accept is not fixed and frozen, but things are always changing, and they're changing in accordance, according to Buddhism, with certain fundamental laws. There are like principles that govern the process of change. And so what we have to do is to understand those principles that govern the process of change. And then we apply a personal effort to produce the kind of changes that we want in order to achieve our goals. And so Sally King sees hope as emerging from this kind of synthesis or functioning together, this unison of acceptance with recognition of change, the lawful nature of change, and the application of personal effort to bring about the kind of changes that we need in order to fulfill our aspirations. Okay, so I was reflecting, after reading her paper, I was reflecting on the concept of change and then looking at it from, again, from my Buddhist point of view. And I came up with a somewhat different formulation, an alternative formulation. So this is the way I conceptualize the idea of change, the idea of hope. So with hope, we start off with a particular desired goal. And from a Buddhist point of view, we would say that the goal that we're aspiring for at the personal level is liberation, the, the liberation from suffering, the liberation from the cycle of birth and death, the achievement of nibbana or nirvana or Buddhahood. So we have the desired goal, and then we need an aspiration, a deep aspiration to achieve that goal. So first we envisage the goal, then we form an aspiration to achieve that goal, or at least an aspiration to move closer to that goal, to transform ourselves in ways that will bring the achievement of that goal, but to transform ourselves in ways that will help us progress towards that goal. So we have the aspiration, and then we need the faith that the goal can actually be achieved, the trust that that goal can be achieved. So it's not just an empty aspiration, a futile aspiration, an aspiration that's going to be disappointed, but we need faith that the goal can be achieved. And then we have to apply personal effort to attain that goal. Okay, so we have a vision of the goal, the aspiration to achieve that goal, to progress towards that goal, the faith that the goal is achievable, and then personal effort along, in this case, it will be personal effort in cultivating the path that the Buddha has prescribed to attain that goal. So those will be 1, 2, 3, 4 elements that enter into hope. And I looked for a couple of texts which could substantiate this way of uh, defining or conceptualizing the idea of hope. And I found one in a passage that occurs in the several times in the Majjhima Nikaya. For example, in the Majjhima Nikaya Sutta number 29, we have here some young man or woman goes forth from the home life into the homeless life out of faith. And this is their faith. I am subject to birth, old age, and death, to sorrow, pain, and misery. I'm a victim of suffering, oppressed by suffering. Surely it is possible to put an end to this entire mass of suffering. So here we could see, I think if we look closely, we could see the, uh, initially, we could see the first three elements. We see the vision of a particular goal that is putting an end to this entire mass of suffering. Then we have the aspiration, the desire, the wish to achieve that goal. And then the trust or faith that the goal can be achieved. That faith or trust is conveyed by the word surely. Surely it is possible to put an end to this entire mass of suffering. And then this passage is followed by the statement that this young man or woman, based on their aspiration, they go forth into the homeless life. They undertake the training, the monastic training that the Buddha lays down, and then they achieve the goal. In this case, liberation from the cycle of repeated birth and death. In other words, nibbana. Yeah, there's another passage that I found which again sort of substantiates this way of conceiving hope in Buddhism, even though the text doesn't use the word hope, but we could say that it is implied, entailed. So this is in the Anguttara Nikaya, the numerical discourses. It's in the collection of the twos, and it's sutta number 19. The Buddha says, he's addressing the monks, and he says, abandon the unwholesome. It's possible to abandon the unwholesome. If it weren't possible to abandon the unwholesome, I wouldn't tell you to do so. But because it's possible to abandon the unwholesome, I say, abandon the unwholesome. And when you abandon the unwholesome, then you will remove the causes of misery and suffering. So that's the first part of the sutta. Then the second part tells us, the Buddha continues and he says, develop the wholesome. It's possible to develop the wholesome. If it weren't possible to develop the wholesome, I wouldn't tell you to develop the wholesome. But because it is possible to develop the wholesome, I tell you, develop the wholesome, and developing the wholesome will lead to your well-being and happiness. So this sutta sort of confirms sort of the two, what I would call here, two pillars of faith. One, or two pillars of hope. One is the possibility of abandoning the unwholesome. And in a way, this idea of abandoning the unwholesome, the Buddha's confirmation of that possibility goes against some of the grain of some contemporary thinking, maybe particularly the strain of thought stemming from Freudian psychology, which tells us that the id, that deep base or foundation of the human mind, is driven by these primordial urges towards pleasure and towards satisfaction, which is willing to inflict any amount of misery on others in order to satisfy that primordial urge for pleasure, particularly sexual pleasure. And also, other psychologists tell us that human instincts for pursuing pleasure and causing destruction, for hatred and antagonism, are just so deeply ingrained in the human mind that we can never get rid of them. And if that were true, that would be, in a way, the recipe for despair. But what the Buddha tells us, not only that it's possible to get rid or to reduce the unwholesome, to reduce these forces of greed and aversion, but it's possible to abandon them, to cut them off at the root, to completely liberate the mind from all of those unwholesome tendencies, greed, hatred, ignorance, the conceit, envy, jealousy, miserliness, all those kilesas, defilements, can be abandoned. And then the second part of the statement speaks about developing the wholesome. And that tells us the key word here is to develop. In Pali, the word is bhaveti, or the noun bhavana, development, which means to bring into being. Just the way one might, if one is cultivating crops, one plants the seeds, and then when the seeds get adequate nourishment and rain, when they're well looked after, the seeds will send up their sprouts, and then the sprouts will develop into the crops until we get our harvest. And so the Buddha says to develop the wholesome, to cultivate these wholesome qualities. We plant the seeds, we make the effort, we apply right effort to developing those wholesome seeds, nourishing them, cultivating them. And as we do so, those wholesome seeds start to sprout. They grow stronger and stronger until they flourish and they sort of adorn and beautify the mind. And so the qualities to be abandoned, the defilements, I mentioned the roots are greed, hatred, and delusion, and those have many of offshoots, many secondary defilements. So what are these wholesome qualities to be developed? And the way I like to think about developing the wholesome qualities is to conceive of this in terms of that set of qualities that we call paramis or paramitas. You know, sort of the direct path to liberation will be the 8 factors of the Noble Eightfold Path or the development of the 7 factors of enlightenment. But I see most of us, myself included, on a sort of gradual path in which we have to nourish our minds and nourish the wholesome potentials of the mind. And in my own view, in my own way of practice, the most sort of essential qualities to be nurtured are the qualities that are included in this set called the paramis or paramitas. And so we have, in the Theravada tradition, we have 10 paramitas. These are giving or generosity, moral practice or disciplined conduct in accordance with the precepts, renunciation, which means doesn't necessarily mean that you have to seek monastic ordination or go off into the forest to live an ascetic life, but it can entail simplifying one's lifestyle, reducing sort of one's possessions to a fairly minimum level, and developing wisdom, insight, or understanding through study and meditation, then developing energy, applying the energy to eliminate the unwholesome and develop the wholesome. Then the very important quality of patience, being able, especially in our relations with others, to deal with others, especially hostile, aggressive, or disagreeable people, to deal with them patiently, with forbearance, with endurance, with understanding. Then truthfulness, making a commitment to speak the truth and to live truthfully, honestly, in accordance with our values. And maybe we could include under truthfulness sincerity, being sincere in one's speech and sincere in one's behavior. So truthfulness, and then determination, that is forming an aspiration, forming a resolution, the determination to cultivate and develop these other good qualities of the Buddhist path, and then applying energy and effort to developing them. And then the next one is metta or loving kindness. And under the heading of loving kindness, I would also include compassion and altruistic joy. And then the last one is equanimity, that is having an unmoving mind, a mind that can't be shaken by praise and blame of others, by honor, dishonor, by pleasure and pain, gain or loss, but a mind that always remains balanced, clear, unshaken, unshakable. And so we have these qualities. Again, I'll just go through them, the 10: generosity, moral conduct, renunciation, wisdom, energy, patience, truthfulness, determination, loving kindness, and equanimity. And sort of the promise of the Buddha's path, or the promise that the Buddha gives us, is that by methodically developing these 10 qualities over time, developing them patiently, persistently, with determination, these qualities can gain in such power, such potency, such a capacity that they can completely overwhelm the unwholesome dispositions of the mind. And when they gather enough force, they can break through the barriers separating us from the unconditioned, from the ultimate goal, which is nibbana or enlightenment, and bring the realization of that goal. So that is the faith or trust that we place in the Buddha's path. And then by forming the aspiration to realize that goal, we make the effort to cultivate these qualities. But 10 qualities are a lot. So, how do we go about developing these in our everyday life? And this is what I found very, very valuable in my own practice. Don't start off trying to focus on all 10 qualities, but you choose 3 of those qualities embedded in the paramis. And then every day, as part of your practice early in the morning, you make the determination, let me grow in this particular quality. For example, if you find you have a tendency to miserliness, you make the determination, let me be generous and open-handed, giving to others whenever the opportunity arises. If you have the tendency to get angry and irritated easily, you might form the determination, let me be patient under all circumstances, no matter how difficult they might be. If you tend to be lazy, you can make the determination, let me be energetic, striving diligently to dispel laziness and apply myself to the practice of the Buddhist path. And so you choose 3 qualities among the 10 paramitas, and each day you reflect on them. You choose the 3 qualities maybe that you find that you are most deficient in, the 3 qualities that you want to plant in your mind and cultivate. And as you do this, you find that those qualities will, from day to day, as you're doing this day after day, if you look back after 1 week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, you might not see much of a difference. But after a couple of months, 6 months, you look back and you see that these qualities have become much stronger in your mind, much more natural to you. And at that point, you could add 2 or 3 more qualities, continue for a few months, then add again 2 or 3 more qualities until you are reflecting every day on the 10 paramitas. And you do this, you start off with the hope that by undertaking this practice, I'm going to grow in those qualities, that I'm going to plant them into my mind and make them part and parcel of my own character. And over time, as I said, over months or even years, you'll find that you just naturally embody and express those 10 beautiful and wonderful paramitas. Okay, so this is dealing with the aspect of hope from the personal point of view. But I also want to deal with the aspect of hope from, we might call this the collective or communal, the communal point of view. Because we live not as isolated individuals, just enfolded upon back upon ourselves, but we live embodied in a world, sort of part, sort of woven together in our own families, in our communities, in our country, and in the world community as a whole. I think it's part of our responsibility as Buddhists, not just to be practicing the path for our own good, for our own benefit, but also practicing in order to bring about changes and transformations, positive changes and transformations in the different social networks, communal networks to which we belong, expanding from family to community to nation to the world. Yeah, there's a very beautiful text coming from the Confucian tradition called The Great Learning. And it goes something like this. It says it's probably written a generation or so after Confucius, but it's referring to the ancients. And it says that the ancients who wanted to manifest their bright virtue to all the world first governed their own states well. They wanting to govern their states, they first established harmony in their families. To establish harmony in their own families, they first cultivated their own persons, they cultivated themselves. And then wanting to cultivate themselves, they first corrected their minds. So in our Buddhist practice, we start off in order to make an impact on the world, we start off by first correcting our minds, by trying to cultivate, to abandon the unwholesome, to overcome greed, hatred, ignorance, jealousy, miserliness, and develop those beautiful, wholesome qualities of the paramitas and other wholesome qualities. So we correct our minds and cultivate ourselves. By cultivating ourselves, we can bring harmony in our families. When we have harmonious families, then our states, our nations will be well governed. And when the nations are well governed, then we can bring brightness and peace and harmony to the world. And we can see this in the vision statement of Buddhist Global Relief that Tricia read it this morning, but I'll read it again. So this is sort of what motivates the work of Buddhist Global Relief. We say we're inspired by the vision of a world in which poverty has finally been banished, a world where we can all obtain the basic material supports of a meaningful life, food, clothing, housing, and healthcare, a world in which everyone can receive a satisfactory education and pursue that which gives their life value and purpose, a world in which all people dwell in peace and harmony with one another and with the natural environment. Okay, can we actually achieve that vision? Okay, if we're being realistic, we would say it's very difficult, probably impossible. As long as human beings inhabit this planet, the great majority of people are going to be driven, motivated, pushed by their greed and hatred. But what we can do is motivate ourselves to make the effort to bring about that kind of world. We could apply our own energy, our own determination, our own loving kindness and compassion to make some effort to eliminate the poverty in which too many billions, several billions of people around the world have to struggle every day. We can make some effort to ensure that people who are now lacking adequate food, clothing, housing, and healthcare can achieve those material supports. We can make some effort to see that people who would otherwise spend their whole life unable even to read or write can receive a satisfactory level of education, such as the girls in some of these programs that we support in India, Cambodia, Vietnam, Nicaragua, Thailand, girls from the poorest strata of society who go through high school and then on to college and university and become doctors, businesswomen, teachers, scientists. And we can make some effort to ensure that people can live together in peace and harmony with each other and with the natural environment. And even though it's probably impossible to realize this goal perfectly, but still we always have to be sustained by the hope that if we make some effort, if we personally dedicate ourselves to that goal, we can make some progress towards achieving that goal. And I want to end this talk with a little story that I think it might have come out from the Zen tradition, but it comes from Japan. And I first encountered it many years ago, I think when I was in college, in a book called Zen Flesh, Zen Bones. Okay, the story goes like this. There was once in medieval Japan an official, a very important official, who had a servant. The servant's name was Zenkai. And Zenkai, when he was serving his master, he saw that his master had a very beautiful wife, and probably the master was rather old and always busy with his official business and neglecting his wife. And so the servant Zenkai and the wife came to associate more and more closely until they fell in love with each other and started to have a sexual relationship. But one day, the official came into his apartment when Zenkai and his wife were in bed together and caught them. And the official grabbed his sword and was going to attack Zenkai, but Zenkai grabbed his sword and he slew the official, killed him, and then he was afraid. So together with the official's wife, the two of them ran away together and they went wandering through to a remote part of Japan, begging their food. But over time, Zenkai came to see that the woman was rather annoying and greedy and irritating. And so, and so he discarded her. He left her behind and went on with his wandering. And as he was traveling around the country, he came across a mountain road, a road along the side of a mountain. And he came to learn that this road was very dangerous. And he heard that many travelers along that road would fall down off the cliff and fall down to their death or to serious injury. And he was a strong young man. And so the idea came to him to dig a tunnel through the mountain so that travelers could avoid the dangerous cliff and just get from one side of the mountain to the other by passing through the tunnel. And so he went into the town and maybe he begged from others some tools, a axe and a pick and some other tools, a chisel, a hammer, and he started to work away at digging a tunnel through that mountain. And it was a rather dense, solid mountain. And every day he would beg his food in the village and go back to work, chiseling away, chipping away. 1 year goes by, 2 years, 3, 4, 5 years, still working away, working away. 10 years go by, 20 years go by, even 30 years go by, and he's still chipping away, trying to dig a tunnel through that mountain. And meanwhile, back at the palace, the official son, who was just an infant at the time that his father was slain, is now a strong young man, maybe in his early 30s, and he learns, he's heard that this Zenkai killed his father, and he's determined to find Zenkai and to take his revenge by killing the man who killed his father. And so he travels over Japan, making inquiries, and somehow he's able to locate Zenkai. He comes up to him, he sees Zenkai working, digging away at the mountain, and he says, "You are the one who killed my father. Now I've found you at last. I'm going to kill you." And Zenkai says to him, "Please, I'm willing to give you my life, but you can see that I'm digging this tunnel through the mountain so that I can save the lives of the many people who travel along this mountain road. So please, I promise you, I'm not going to run away. Just wait patiently till I get my tunnel through the mountain." And so the young man agrees to this and sits down on a nearby rock, and he sees Zenkai digging away, chipping away. Probably he goes into town from time to time. Maybe he gets bored sitting around watching Zenkai work, so he stays in a hotel or motel, not a, no, a hotel. And there are no motels in medieval Japan. A rest house of some kind, and comes periodically to check on Zenkai. And then he sees Zenkai is working so hard, he thinks, why should he just work alone? Let me continue, let me help. And so he takes off his shirt, he takes another instrument, and they work together, chipping away at the mountain, working together for 2 years. And then finally, after 32 years of digging through the mountain, they break through to the other side and create the opening so that travelers can now travel through the tunnel and reach the other side of the mountain. Okay, so now Zenkai says, "My work is completed. I offer you my life." And he holds down his head, waiting for the son to take his sword and cut off his head. But the son drops the sword and bows down to Zenkai and says, "How can I take the life of my teacher?" Because Zenkai has taught the young man the lesson of compassion, that one has to go on doing the work of compassion patiently, persistently, with determination and with hope, hoping that eventually one can reach one's goal. And so that is the kind of work that we do with Buddhist Global Relief. We're never going to get to the complete end of that tunnel to completely eradicate hunger and malnutrition from this world. But each year with our projects, we are digging little by little, chipping away at that tunnel, the stone of that tunnel, chipping away at that mountain, the stone of the mountain of hunger and malnutrition, creating a tunnel so that thousands of people can pass through and realize the goal of their life, realize a meaningful life. Okay, so maybe this will do for my talk on hope in these difficult times, sustaining hope in difficult times. And maybe if anybody has some questions or comments, please feel welcome to ask them in the way that you did this morning. You can use the raise hand symbol in the in Zoom. It can be maybe in the reactions box. In some programs, it has a space of its own, or you could use the chat box. Okay. Okay.
Bante, there was one question that came in during your talk.
Yeah.
It was a question that said, "Can pasada be used for hope?" I don't know how to pronounce the word pasada.
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 Yeah. Pasada is more, I would say, trust or confidence. I would say pasada maybe is an element in hope. Maybe not an exact translation, but also pasada can be, it's closely related to faith, which I said is one of the elements in hope. So I said hope it involves the goal, the aspiration, then faith and trust that the goal can be achieved. So pasada uh, can maybe be the Pali word corresponding to that faith and trust. Yeah, so it can be an element in hope, but I wouldn't say that pasada on its own can represent hope. Okay, are there any other questions? I see one hand symbol up, somebody named Brad.
Yes, Lante, thank you. I think it was so important what you said about, well, just to paraphrase, not expecting perfection. That nothing is going to frustrate and disappoint us more than expecting to be able to turn samsara into nibbana.
Yeah, that would be, yeah.
We get that idea in our head sometimes, and we just set ourselves up for so much more suffering because samsara stays samsara.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, we can never expect, to get absolutely perfect, a utopia on Earth, and even utopian ideas can be rather dangerous because those who set out with utopian ideas, often they start off with good intentions, but in order to realize their utopian ideal, they have to suppress, and sometimes it can lead to mass killing of others. Like we've had utopian projects in the Soviet Union in the 20th century and perhaps in other forms. Okay, any other questions or comments?
I have another question from the
Yeah,
chat, Bante.
yeah,
The question is, how was Zenkai teaching compassion? Was it in wanting to provide safety to those using the dangerous road?
yeah, exactly, exactly. Yeah, because he did all of that work. He was not going to get any benefit from it for himself, but He saw that travelers, or he learned that travelers were traveling along that road were falling off the edge of the cliff and falling to their death or serious injury. And so he realized that I guess that he had the strength and the ability to create a tunnel through that mountain so that the travelers would be able to pass through safely. Yeah, the story that as I came across it, is just about half of a page. I elaborated a little bit in order to make it more interesting. I saw David had a comment that he said that it seems like a weird story. I don't know why. Did you put a comment that it seems like a weird story?
Not me.
Not you. Maybe it was some other David.
Yeah.
Okay, I see a hand. Ch- Charila?
Charala,
Charila.
like chair of love, Charala.
Okay, Charila. Okay.
I belong to a sangha that's around the Dallas area, and you know Dallas is very big in sports, and the big thing in sports is hope is not a strategy. And now you've completely obliterated that that statement. There'll be so many people in sports who say, "What do you hope for the team next year?" And the coach will say, "Hope is not a strategy." But I see the way you've explained it, that it can be a strategy.
Yeah, I
Thank you
think,
for that.
yeah, we have to distinguish. Actually, this is a very important point. Two ideas of hope, or two concepts of hope. One is what I would call passive hope, which we could maybe identify or define as wishful thinking. And that means where you think it's enough to have the hope and you just wish for the goal to come to you without making effort to achieve that goal. So that is the wrong kind of hope. And that would be a kind of hope that would be contrary to the Buddha's teaching, that we don't just sit back and say, I hope to be enlightened, I hope to be enlightened, and then I just go out and enjoy myself and don't make any effort. But what we mean by hope is hope that inspires effort, that motivates the effort. So when the Dallas team, what kind of team is it? Football, baseball? I don't. Okay. Anyway, let's say a football team. You hope to be able to win, maybe to win the game or to win the season, to become the champion for the season. You have to start off with that hope. But in order to realize that hope, you don't just sit back and then you go out and enjoy yourself. And then when the game comes, you play the game. But you have to train during the off season. You have to train, practice different strategies, learn different types of passes, tackles, and so on. So then when the time for the game comes, then you can win. Okay, so any other questions or comments?
Bante, about this story, I've seen a few comments of folks wondering about how to make sense of the fact that Zenkai slayed his lover's husband and abandoned her and denied his future student his mother, and didn't have to do some kind of atonement for that.
This is just a story. And I think the point of the story, I'm not an apologist for a Senkai. I just came across the story and thought the part about his digging the tunnel is a good illustration for the kind of work that we doing, you know, gradually, patiently chipping away at the stone mountain over many, many years in order to reach the goal is a kind of illustrates the work of gradually helping people emerge from hunger and malnutrition. But I'm not going to apologize for all aspects of Zenkai's behavior in that respect. And I don't know whether maybe the story is not historically true. Maybe it's just a kind of allegory to show the importance of persistence in one's compassionate action. Okay, I think then I'll conclude this afternoon's program. I'll do a little chanting, and this will be a chant of the Jaya Mangala Gata. It's a set of verses that draw upon the spiritual power of the Buddha, Dhamma, and Sangha in order to convey and to spread blessings to the listeners and then out into the world. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato sama sambuddhassa maha karuniko nato hitaya sabbapaninang pureta parami sabha pato sambodhimuttamang etena satchavajena hotu te jayamangalang Jayanto Bodhiamule Sakyanang Nandivadano Evang Twihang Jayo Hotu Jayasu Jayamangalang Sakatva Buddharatanang Osadang Uttamang Varang Hitang Deva Manusanang Buddha Tejena Sotina Na Santu Padavasabe Pat Hotu te jayamangalang sakatva dhammaratanang osadang uttamang varang parilahu pasamanang dhammate jena sotina na santu padava sabe bayate upasama sakatva sangaratanang osadang uttamang varang Ahuneyang Pahuneyang Sangatejena Sotina Na Santu Padava Sabe Rogavu Pasamentu Te Sakatva Buddharatanang Osadangut Yang Kinchi Ratanang Loke Vijati Vividaputu Ratana Buddha Samangnati Tasma Soti Bhavantu Te Yang Kinchi Ratanang Loke Vijati Vividaputu Ratanang Dhamma Samangnati Tasma Soti Bhavantu Te Yang Kinchi Ratanang Loke Vijati Vividaputu Ratanang Sangha Samangnati Tasma Soti Bhavantu Te Sabityo Vivajantu Sabarogo Vinasatu Mate Bhavatu Antarayo Sukhi Digayuko Bhava Bhavatu Sabha Mangalang Rakantu Sabha Devata Sabha Buddhanubhavena Sada Soti Bhavantu Te Bhavatu Sabha Mangalang Rakantu Sabha Devata Sabha Dhammanubhavena Sada Soti Bhavantu Te Bhavatu Sabha Mangalang Rakantu Sabha Devata Sabha Sanganubhavena Sada Soti Bhavantu Te. Okay, again, thank you everybody for joining us, and thank you to Tricia for being the host or facilitator, and David also for his excellent overview of the work of BGR. And please remember that we still have another session for this weekend retreat or Saturday retreat. That will be the evening or late afternoon session from 7 to 9 p.m. Eastern Time and Pacific Time 4 to 6 p.m. And any in Central Time or Mountain Time can make the corresponding adjustments. Okay, so hope to see you this evening.